The Jets might be a 1-7 rebuilding team, but they should not be big sellers at the NFL trade deadline. Locked On Jets starts now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, October 31st, 2025. Happy Halloween to you. I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Our episode today is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. Well, on today's show, we are going to focus on the second half of the 2025 season for the New York Jets. The Jets have their bye this week, and it comes at just about the halfway point of the season. And an NFL season has 17 games. The Jets have played 8 of them, 9 to go. So what needs to be accomplished over the final 9 games of the season? Well, the Jets need to start making progress. And that means winning games. Jets need to develop some of their young players because this is a rebuilding team that's focused on the future. And the Jets, before anything else, need to navigate the trade deadline, which is Tuesday. That is the final day teams can make trades in the 2025 season. We've already seen one trade. The Jets sent Michael Carter II to Philadelphia for John Mechie, and then there was also a late-round pick swap in the 2027 draft. There are plenty of rumors, though, about the New York Jets, which is natural. When you are a team that is 1-7 and hopelessly out of the playoff race, people wonder, are you going to keep veterans? Are you going to send them off for draft picks? I think that the Jets clearly, if the choice is whether they should be a buyer or a seller, should be a seller. You know, the Jets should not be looking to add players. The only players the Jets should be looking to add through trade, and look, you always should be open to opportunities, but the Jets should only be looking to add players who are, first of all, young, and second of all, will likely be on the team 2 years from now. You know, if a team if another team is offering the Jets a good deal on a second-year player who has a chance to be a good starter going forward, of course you take it. But the Jets' main focus should be selling. And we frequently are at this point. I think one of the big frustrations for me last year was the Jets did not sell at the trade deadline. They had lots of players who you knew were not coming back for 2025. The team was out of the playoff race, yet they held on to all these veterans. It did not make a whole lot of sense to me. This year, the Jets are also out of the playoff race. Things are a bit different, though, because on the 2024 Jets, there were lots of guys who you knew were just gone after the season. You knew that there were lots of players who were not coming back for 2025. In 2025, there aren't that many players who you know for a fact are not returning in 2026. Now, I will say this. If there are any players in the final year of their contract and you know that there's no chance they're returning, you trade them now. You know, even if it hurts the team in 2025, well, you know what? The team's 1-7. We're not going anywhere this year. So if there are any players, and the two big guys who have the focus right now are Breece Hall and Quincy Williams. They are set to be free agents after the season. If you know with either of them or with both of them that there's just no chance they're going to resign with you, get something in return. Yeah, obviously it'll hurt the team in the short run, but we're not going anywhere in the short run anyway. Should the Jets trade Breece Hall and Quincy Williams, though? Well, I've been going back and forth on Breece. And you've heard the conflict through the season. It's like you see signs of promise, then you see frustrating signs from Breece. A guy who can be inconsistent, but you look at on the whole, he's having a very good season. And I think sometimes we focus too much on what a player is not instead of what a player is. And with Breece Hall, since the Jets drafted him, I've wanted this, you've wanted this, the Jets have wanted this. We've been hoping Breece Hall would be like one of those transcendent backs who just takes over games every single week, a guy who's a true 3-down back, a guy who's an elite talent. I don't know that that's what Breece is. What Breece is a great home run threat, a guy who's dangerous in space, both running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield, a guy who, maybe struggles with reading blocks on zone plays, but a guy, when he hits the hole hard, is big and tough to bring down. And Breece Hall may never be like that top 5 back, but he's a darn good back in this league. And where the Jets are right now, we should be looking to add good players. We should not be looking to subtract good players. Now, if some team offers you a crazy package for Breece Hall, of course you take it. If some team offers, multiple high draft picks and it's just too good of a package to turn down, then you take it. But I don't know that I'd be looking to get rid of Breece Hall. I think I'd be looking to extend him because, again, I don't think the Jets are really in a position where they should be actively looking to subtract good players. Quincy Williams is a little different because I'm not sure Quincy's coming back, and I don't think Quincy's had a great season in the new scheme. So maybe you look to trade Quincy Williams, but you look across the rest of the landscape, and you hear some really crazy trade suggestions. Like I've heard people suggest, well, maybe the Jets will trade Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner, which they're not going to do. They just re-sign these guys. Both these guys have expressed that they want to be here, part of the rebuild. The Jets have shown that they want these guys to be here. It's not plausible anyway, because you can't trade a guy this early into a contract. I mean, those two contracts haven't even kicked in yet. If you trade a guy immediately after you re-sign him, you're looking at a devastating cap hit in dead money. A guy who has been discussed as a trade option who's a little bit more realistic is Quinnen Williams. Now, Quinnen Williams is getting into his late 20s. I would not look to trade Quinnen Williams, though. Now, he's entering the final year of his contract next year, so he's not going to be a free agent after this year. After next season, he'll be a free agent if he doesn't get an extension. But even though Quinnen Williams is getting up there, he's still in his prime. And the way Quinnen Williams plays, because of how much of his game is based on technique, I think he's going to age well. You never know for sure. I mean, sometimes you think a guy's going to age really well and his production just completely falls off. That happened with Darrelle Revis. Revis was the smartest corner who ever played. And I felt like, he would probably age very gracefully because your speed will go. And when your speed and athleticism go, you become less effective. But if you play with smarts, the fall off is typically less pronounced. The fall off typically takes longer, and you age gracefully. Well, Revis's play went from Pro Bowler in 2015 to unplayable in 2016. In like 1 year, he went from being very good to very bad. So you never know for sure. But I think the odds are very good that Quinnen Williams is going to age well. And my inclination would be to keep him. The other thing I'll say though is that even if you're going to trade Quinnen Williams, he's the type of guy that's going to be much easier to get a deal done with in the offseason, because Quinnen Williams entering the final year of his new contract, I think if you trade him, any deal is going to require the new team to reach a contract extension with him. And that's going to be tough to do in a couple of days. It's much easier to do in the offseason when teams have more of a sense of what their cap situation is going to be, how they can structure a deal to maximize their cap space. I don't think I think if Quinnen Williams gets traded, it would have to wait until the offseason. And I'm not sure the Jets would get a better deal trading him right now, because again, you have to discount. I think there would be a discount if there's not a long-term contract extension in place. So even in a world where you want to trade Quinnen Williams, and I'm not there right now, but even in that world, you're probably waiting till the offseason. So, it's weird to say because the Jets are 1-7. They're clearly out of the race. And when you're in the situation, you're almost certainly going to be a seller more than you're going to be a buyer. But I think the Jets should be cautious sellers. I don't think they should be a team that aggressively sells. And look, part of this is a team that has a lot of young players. There's been a clear youth movement. I feel like every single week, if you listen to my game recaps, I'm giving you the number of young players who are playing. And it feels like every week it's between 9 and 11 first and second year players are seeing major snaps. And that's part of the reason the Jets don't have a lot of guys to trade, because they are leaning so much into getting young players reps, trying to develop those young players. It's the critical thing for this team going forward. That said, of the few veteran performers who still are playing high-end football, I think you want to keep them. Jermaine Johnson's another name that's coming up. I mean, have you seen the defense this year with Jermaine versus without Jermaine? Keep Jermaine. I want to see most of these players here, and the focus be on the young guys developing, not on getting the quality veterans out of here. And here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about another thing the Jets need to focus on over these final 9 games. That is developing those young players. There are some players on this team who have a chance to be part of the core going forward. Now's the time we've got to start see them claiming their roles and showing that they can handle life in the NFL. We'll talk about it as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. And this week's moment that moved the game forward is Breece Hall's halfback option pass that went for a touchdown to Mason Taylor that won the Jets their first game of the season in Cincinnati on Sunday. what can I say? Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I did not love calling a halfback pass with the game on the line on the 4-yard line. There's a lot that can go wrong there, but hey, it's tough to complain when it works. Breece Hall makes a good throw. Mason Taylor makes a great catch. And the Jets improbably get their first win of the season in Cincinnati. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And you can also get in on the action in the NFL with FanDuel. Looking ahead to next weekend, the Jets are currently 1.5-point home favorites against the Cleveland Browns. I guess one win can make a big difference. I didn't think the Jets would be favored for any game the rest of the season, but they are favored currently on FanDuel. It's the best way to get in on the action. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. On today's show, we're focusing on the second half of the Jets season. The bye week comes at just about the halfway point. The thing is, when the NFL moved from 16 to 17 games, it kind of eliminated the halfway point. I guess the Jets' official halfway point is halftime of the Cleveland game next weekend. But the Jets bye this year does come at a very convenient time because it kind of splits the season into half. And we know the first half did not go all that well for the New York Jets. They are 1-7, but they did finish it on a high note. So what happens in the second half now? How do we make the second half a success? And I think on some level, we always knew that the last 9 games would be more important than the first 8 for the New York Jets. Now, I don't think we were expecting them to start 0-7. I don't know. Maybe some of you cynics thought the Jets were going to start 0-7. But no matter how you thought the Jets would do, I think it was always clear that the second half of the season was more important than the first half. And the reason for that is that this is a new regime, but it's not just a new regime. It's a new regime that has come in and cleaned house and has focused on young players. One of the big complaints you hear from NFL fans is the coaches don't put young players on the field. And you always hear this, especially from fans of the losing team. I don't care if they play poorly. I just want to get these young guys some reps so we can try and develop them for the future. Now, in reality, fans care about this quite a bit because the complaints about Aaron Glenn and his coaching staff did not stop because the Jets put young players on the field. There were lots of complaints about the lack of discipline, about the lack of fundamentals. And to be clear, the coaching staff did deserve some heat for that. You cannot put all of the blame for the Jets' struggles on the fact they're playing young players. But I think that the proliferation of first and second year players who have seen big snaps for this team has played probably a bigger role than people realize in some of the undisciplined play we've seen from this football team. Because you have guys who are starting. You have the 2 tackles, Olu Fashanu and Armand Membou. You have Mason Taylor, who's kind of taken on a starting role as a tight end. But you also have your role players. You have your guys like Jawan Briggs, who the Jets acquired from Cleveland before the start of the season, who maybe is not going to be a huge part of the Jets going forward, but a guy who, getting a rotational level of snaps. Isaiah Davis, who stepped up in Braylon Allen's injury and become the number 2 back. You have some guys taking on huge roles, other guys taking on smaller roles. And it's important that as the season progresses, we see these guys improve. Now, I think Armand Membou has been a pleasant surprise. I'm close, and I usually would not say this halfway through a rookie season. I'm close to saying Armand Membou is set, means the Jets are set at right tackle for the next 8 to 10 years because he's come in and beaten all expectations. I was expecting more growing pains out of Membou. And I would not, the reason I set those expectations was, I said this before the season, that there were going to be some rough moments from Membou. And part of the reason I said that was, not to be pessimistic. It was more to kind of set expectations so that if he had a rough start, you wouldn't be panicking. Well, he's gone out there. I mean, I'm not saying every game's been great. There have been a few rough games in there, but he's been well ahead of schedule. This was a guy I thought was going to come in and need some reps to get some seasoning. He looks really good. I mean, I think I'm close to declaring Membou a successful draft pick. And I usually don't do this early, but he's been that good. But you look at other spots, there are guys who have shown flashes. but you still see that they're not quite there yet. I mean, one of the guys who you could say that about is Olu Fashanu. What I'd say about Olu Fashanu right now is he's probably a below average starting left tackle, but that's not bad. It's not bad for a couple of reasons. Number one is that a below average starting left tackle has value. And there's a big difference between below average starting left tackle and left tackle who's a disaster. Olu Fashanu, I don't think, is a disaster. I think he's shown that against lesser competition, he can play at a high level. He had very good games against Miami and Cincinnati. Neither team has a great pass rush, but Fashanu held up well in those games. So, what we want to see from him, though, is improvement going forward, because even a year and a half into his career, he plays a position where you see players make vast improvements. Usually like a year and a half into your career, at most other positions, you kind of are who you are. You might make some marginal improvements here or there, but we kind of have a good sense of who you are. I don't think that's true at tackle. I think tackle is just like one of the longest transition spots to the NFL. So I'm not ready to write off the idea that Olu Fashanu could improve. And I hope to see more improvement for him going forward. And you look across the team. I mean, Mason Taylor, it's been okay. I mean, look, in context, what Mason Taylor has done has been pretty decent. Of course, it helps when the last game he played, he had an excellent game-winning touchdown reception. But he's showing signs of growth. That's the hope going forward. Am I ready to declare Mason Taylor as a 10-year starting tight end yet? No, but I think given the circumstances he's in, where he had to play a heavy snap load early because the Jets had nothing else at the tight end position, he's kind of on schedule. One of the things I said, like heading into the season for Mason Taylor, is that you had to limit your expectations early with him, because he's a guy who still needs some development, and on a better team, he would not be getting big snaps. But perhaps the heavy snap share would help accelerate his development, because he's getting lots of game reps, and that's the best way to learn in the NFL. The thing about giving young players game reps is that they usually struggle. Teams usually don't have the luxury of giving young players extensive game reps, because young players struggling makes you lose. The Jets do, which might lead to issues the first half of the season, but could show accelerated growth in the second half of the season. Azareye'h Thomas, who's probably not long for the starting lineup, because he's a backup, and the Jets like their starters. Sauce Gardner's excellent. Sauce Gardner's having a Sauce Gardner season. He's having a bounce back year after a disappointing 2024. Brandon Stephens showing real signs of life the last couple of weeks. He's been playing very good football, which is not something I ever expected to say about Brandon Stephens. And then Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is in the slot, and the Jets have shown they're all in on Jarvis Brownlee Jr. by trading Michael Carter. So Azareye'h Thomas may not have many opportunities, but if he plays, you're hoping to see growth. You can say the same thing about Jarvis Brownlee Jr., who's 3 games into his Jets career has played pretty well and just got that big vote of confidence by the team sending sending the guy he replaced out of town. And we can talk Malachi Moore. We could go down the list. It's going to be very, very important for the New York Jets over the final 9 games of the season that these players show legitimate progress, because the season's all about player development. And what good is a season about player development if you don't actually develop your players? It's true of first-year guys, and it's true of second-year guys. I mean, we could talk, again, Jawan Briggs, who is doing a good job, I think, as the number two nose tackle behind Harrison Phillips, a guy who's very strong, a guy who's very tough to move on the line. I want to see him continue to do what he's doing. And, do the Jets have something in Isaiah Davis? One of the things about the running back position is that running hard makes up for a lot of sins. I think sometimes Isaiah Davis is another guy like Breece Hall, where, doesn't always read the blocks perfectly. But I think at the running back position, it's better to hit the hole hard, even if you're hitting the wrong hole, than it is to kind of dance around and be delayed and then hit the right hole late. Isaiah Davis, showed some real flashes against the Cincinnati Bengals. I think there's something there. He's shown he can secure the catch out of the backfield. Maybe he's not like a great route runner you're going to put in the slot, but he's a guy who can catch the ball. And that means he's a weapon on checkdowns. It means he's a weapon on screens. So, there are young players who have flash potential. What we want to see is that potential become more consistent play over the final 9 games of the season. And if that happens, maybe we're finally moving in the right direction for the New York Jets franchise. But there are ways we quantify progress. And here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about the most important thing for the Jets over the final 9 games. It's the effect of the stuff we're talking about. Jets got to start winning some games. We'll dive into it as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Rugiet. Let's be real, making excuses does not solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired. Or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body is just in need of a little extra support. And that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rugiet makes it easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online. No awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. Visit rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNFL so they know we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday. We are talking about the final 9 games of the season for the New York Jets. This team is 1-7 right now. We're about at the halfway point. This is the Jets bye weekend. So what do the Jets need to accomplish over the second half of the season? Now, we've talked a bit about how they have to navigate the trade deadline, and we've talked about how they need to start developing young players. But these are all means to an end, particularly the developing young players part. The ends that you're trying to get to by developing young players is winning more games. Now, heading into the season, I think most people who were realistic acknowledge that it was not likely to be a winning season for the Jets. It was not likely to be a season where you saw the 14-year playoff drought ends. And while the Jets remain mathematically alive for a playoff spot, I think we know that this is not a team that's likely to end that playoff drought. This is almost certainly going to extend to a 15th year. I mean, I guess, there's probably still some Jets believers out there who think the team is now going to run off 10 straight wins to end the season, finish 10-7. But more realistically, I mean, I don't think the talent is there for that. But the question is whether the Jets can start making progress. Because while a season like this is not entirely about the one-loss record, it's very difficult to get to the end of the season and say it's a success if you don't start winning games. And I know people say, well, you want to show progress. The biggest way you show progress in the NFL is to win games. And I do think that the way you win matters, because I think there have been past seasons where the Jets have gotten off to really bad starts, and then they've won some late season games, but it didn't really show any signs of improvement. I mean, 2023 was like that. The Jets were one of the few teams that was out of the playoff race with 3 weeks left in the season. Then over their final 3 games, they finished 2-1. But the 2-1 were narrow wins over a Washington team that drafted second and a New England team that drafted third. So they barely beat 2 of the 3 worst teams in the league that year in 2023 to end the season. That was not a sign of progress. You go back to 2019. Jets started that season 1-7. They ended up going 6-2 over their final 8 games, but not a very impressive 6-2. I mean, they played a very soft schedule. They beat really bad teams like the Giants, Washington, Miami. They had some really narrow wins. There weren't many games you look back on and you say those were quality wins. And that season, the last game, they beat a Buffalo team playing its backups with Matt Barkley in at quarterback instead of Josh Allen because the Bills had already clinched the playoff spot. Even though the Jets went 6-2 over their final 8 games in 2019, that was not a sign the team was improving. What you want to see the Jets do is start playing quality football on a more frequent basis. And that's where, developing those young players really comes in. You don't want like some ugly game where both teams are committing 15 penalties. They're both bottom of the league teams, and the Jets happen to win because they're a little bit less bad. What you want to see is genuine signs that this team is moving forward. We're not going to get the 2022 Detroit Lions. The guy Aaron Glenn is frequently compared to as Dan Campbell because Glenn was on the Campbell's coaching staff with Detroit, which was a major turnaround job. Their second season, the Lions ended with a long winning streak, which included a win against the Jets that was kind of a game that sent the Jets on a downward spiral to end that season. That was year 2 for Detroit. Glenn in year 1, where you're playing this many young guys, you can't expect consistent performances every single week, but you want to see the good start to stack. You want to see the good start to become more consistent, more frequent. One of the things people talk about at the end of a season like this is, well, I don't want to lose for draft position, but I want to see the young players make progress. An ideal situation for some people is a game where the young guys play well and the team still manages to lose at the end. So that way you have signs of hope for your current roster, but you get a higher draft pick. And I guess I understand that, but here's the thing. When young players make progress, they cause wins to happen. if the Jets are going to lose, if Jets lose every single game from here on out, or the Jets only win 1 or 2 more games the rest of the season, it's a good sign the young players are not making progress. That's particularly true because of how many young players are getting big snaps for this team. So while I understand the idea, some people have that, it's better to tank for draft position, I can't share it. And it's just, I especially can't share it this year because we knew heading into the season that what happened in November and December was going to be much more important than what happened in September and October. And it wasn't because, it's not for the typical reasons. Most teams say that that's true because this is when the playoff spots are decided. We knew the Jets probably were not going to be in the playoff mix unless they had some good luck along the way. But November, December is when the young teams in this league, when they really start to make their moves, when they really start to show the progress, when they really start to show the results of all the snaps the young guys are getting, all the game reps the young guys are getting. This is the time of year where you start to see some improvement, where young guys start to figure it out. They start to crack the code of how to play effectively in the NFL. If that happens, the Jets will win more games. And, we can have a discussion about how important it is to have a higher draft pick. And by the way, there's not really that big of a difference picking a few slots lower in the first round. That's something that's been proven over and over again. I mean, there was a study done about a decade ago that found that in any given draft, the third selection at a given position, there's about a coin flip between who was a better player between the number one guy selected at the position and the third guy selected at the position in a typical year. There's not really that. There's typically not that big a gap in expected outcomes, even if you pick a few slots lower. And people say, well, the Jets need a quarterback. Well, you look at the great quarterbacks across the league. A lot of them were not drafted number 1 overall. A lot of them were not drafted number 2 overall. A lot of them were not drafted number 3 overall. And even of those guys, many of them failed in their first team because their team did not put quality surroundings around them. And that's critical for the Jets, because if the Jets are going to draft a quarterback next year, now I don't think they should. I talked about this on Wednesday's show. I'm at the point right now where my mind could be changed depending on what happens over the final 9 games. But I'm at a point right now where I'm a big skeptic of the idea of the Jets to draft a quarterback right now. But if the Jets do draft a quarterback, they're going to need to put that quarterback in a good position. They're going to need to put that quarterback on a stable roster. And the only way you get to a stable roster when you're a team built like the Jets are right now is for those young players to step up, is for those young players to play well, is for those young players to develop. So that's going to be critical over the final 9 games of the season. Look, if the Jets lose out, it's not a good thing. It means that the young players have not developed. So I can't buy into the idea, well, the best thing for the Jets franchise is to get the number 1 pick. You end up with the number 1 pick, you're going to put a quarterback into a situation where he's got no pieces around it because none of the pieces you have shown any growth. They've shown no quality. What's better for the Jets is for the young players to develop. And even if you pick a quarterback a little bit lower, or you go with a veteran quarterback going forward, they're on a team that has that could potentially have the right mix, that could potentially support the quarterback. That's way more important than losing games for a draft spot. And that's one you're not going to change my mind on this year. I think there are certain years where maybe it makes sense to tank. And there might be certain years where it's better to lose games than to win games. This is not one of those years for the New York Jets. We got to start seeing more wins over the final 9 games of the season. But that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and you're listening on a podcast, of course, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. We'll be back next week to talk more Jets.